Los Angeles has the jobs, the weather, the culture. So why are tens of thousands still packing up and leaving? Because for a growing number of residents, not one thing is pushing people out. It is the full stack: housing, work, taxes, commuting, and the daily cost of simply existing. That is what makes this story so important. Outmigration does not usually happen because a city suddenly becomes unlivable overnight. It happens when enough pressure builds, month after month, until leaving starts to look practical. Start with housing, because that is where the squeeze is most visible. In the city of Los Angeles, the median value of owner-occupied housing is about $921,200, and typical home values are still around $933,000 in 2026. Those numbers are not just high. They shape the entire way people think about the future. For many families, owning a home in Los Angeles is no longer about building equity in a place you love. It becomes a question of whether ownership is even reachable. And if you are renting, the story is not much easier. The city's median gross rent is about $1,933 a month. For homeowners with a mortgage, the median monthly housing cost is about $3,497. When your housing payment starts behaving like a second paycheck, the city stops feeling like an upgrade and starts feeling like a bill. A medical expense, a car repair, a shift in work hours, a child's activity fee. Any one of them can turn a stretched budget into a crisis. And even when rents soften a little, that does not make the city cheap. It just means the pain grows a little slower. Apartment List's 2026 data showed Los Angeles rents moving up and down month to month, but never falling into the range that most households would call affordable. That is an important distinction. People do not need a perfect market to leave. They only need a market that keeps them feeling trapped. Housing is the first pressure point. Jobs are the next. Los Angeles is still a massive employment center, but the labor market has become uneven enough to make high costs feel riskier. Total non-farm employment rose only about 0.6% from January 2025 to January 2026, while some sectors, including manufacturing and construction, were down year over year. That sounds like a small number. It is not. In a city with expensive housing, even modest job softness can shift the calculation. If your income is stable, the rent still hurts. If your income is unstable, the rent becomes frightening. That is the real problem. People do not just ask, "Can I afford this apartment today?" They ask, "Will I still be able to afford this next year?" And if the answer becomes uncertain, a city with a high fixed cost starts to feel like a gamble. Now add commuting, which in Los Angeles is not just an annoyance. It is part of the budget. The city's mean one-way travel time to work is about 30.7 minutes. And recent congestion data ranked Los Angeles among the most gridlocked cities in the country, with roughly 87 hours lost per driver in 2025. 87 hours. That is more than 3 full days spent in traffic, not counting the stress, the gas, the wear on your car, or the missed time at home. In a cheaper city, a long commute might feel tolerable. In Los Angeles, it starts to feel like a tax on your life. Because time is money. A long commute means more fuel, more maintenance, more frustration, and less flexibility. It makes childcare harder, scheduling harder, and recovery harder. When people say they are tired of the commute, they are often saying something bigger. They are saying the city is taking too much and giving too little back. That becomes especially important when jobs shift farther away from where people can realistically live. If employment changes and the commute grows longer, the city's geography itself starts to work against the household budget. Suddenly, the cost of staying is not just rent, it is distance. Then come taxes, which often become the final straw rather than the first reason. California's top marginal income tax rate is widely cited at 13.3%. On top of that, Los Angeles County's sales tax rate is 9.75% in 2026. So the city's cost problem is not limited to housing. It follows people into the grocery store, the gas pump, the clothing aisle, and every daily purchase. That matters because taxes are one of the least negotiable parts of life. You can shop around for groceries. You can delay a vacation. You can cut back on dining out. But you cannot really negotiate away the tax burden built into your paycheck and your purchases. Over time, that creates a steady sense that everything costs a little more than it should. And when people are already stretched by rent, commuting, and uncertain work, taxes become the piece that tips the scale. The broader cost of living makes the pressure even clearer. Consumer prices in the Los Angeles area were up about 2.9% over the 12 months ending February 2026, while shelter rose about 3.5%. That means the cost of staying does not rise in one dramatic jump. It keeps creeping. That creep matters. If your lease renews at a higher rate, that is one hit. If groceries go up, that is another. If your electric bill climbs, your commute eats more gas, and your paycheck does not stretch as far, the strain compounds. People are rarely pushed out by a single giant expense. They are pushed by a dozen smaller ones that never seem to stop. Utilities are a perfect example. California's average residential electricity price has been around 32 cents per kilowatt hour, far above the national average. So even basic comfort can feel like a luxury. Cooling the apartment in the summer, heating the house in the winter, leaving the lights on without worrying about the bill. Those ordinary things become expensive decisions. That is why leaving often feels less emotional than it looks from the outside. From the outside, it can seem like someone simply gave up on a city they loved. In reality, they may have done the math over and over again until the math stopped working. And that math is not only about money, it is also about uncertainty. What happens if your job changes? What happens if your rent resets higher? What happens if traffic gets worse and your commute becomes unmanageable? What happens if your paycheck rises, but not as fast as groceries, insurance, or electricity? At some point, staying no longer feels stable. That is the hidden logic behind outmigration. People do not usually leave after one bad month. They leave after the third year when the budget never really resets. They leave after the commute starts stealing their evenings. They leave after the job market feels less forgiving. They leave after taxes, utilities, and everyday prices all seem to rise together. And once that pattern sets in, the city's population story changes. Los Angeles was still estimated at about 3.87 million people in July 2025, but that was down from its 2020 estimates base. More strikingly, Los Angeles County lost roughly 54,000 residents from July 2024 to July 2025, with much of that movement heading to other U.S. states. That is a major shift, and it tells us something important. People are not only leaving because they dislike the city, they are leaving because other places now offer a more workable trade-off. Maybe the housing is cheaper. Maybe the commute is shorter. Maybe the taxes are lighter. Maybe the job is closer to home. Often, it is all of the above. That is why outmigration is rarely about one villain. It is about competing realities. Los Angeles still offers a lot. It remains one of the country's biggest job centers, most recognizable cities, and most culturally influential places. But for many residents in 2026, the question is no longer whether the city has value. It does. The question is whether that value still outweighs the cost of staying. And for an increasing number of people, the answer is becoming no. That is the real story behind the move out. Not collapse, not panic. Just a steady, cumulative calculation. Housing, work, taxes, traffic, and daily expenses all press in at the same time until leaving starts to look like the rational choice. Do the stay or go spreadsheet.